are very excited to welcome a very special guest to our show, and we're going to be celebrating somebody very special as well, Alice Pearce. Of course, many people know Alice from the Bewitched series, the beloved Bewitched series, and we've talked about Bewitched so many times here on the Jim Masters Show, but Alice has had a life that was very, very special, and this gentleman here, this educator, this writer, this author extraordinaire, Fredrick Tucker, is here to share behind the scenes the life of the beloved Alice Pearce. And it's a really terrific way that he's done it. Sweet Oddball, the Story of Alice Pearce, is the name of his book, which he wrote with lots of love and appreciation for this brilliant artist, this brilliant talent who isn't always talked about like she was. And she had a very interesting life. And we're going to bring it back to life right now for you here on the show in a very loving way. And if you'd like to participate and comment during the show and celebrate the wonderful Alice, whether you remember her as Gladys Kravitz or in any of the other productions and films and things that she had an opportunity to be a part of, we encourage you to engage with us. Without further ado, let's welcome our very special guest, Fredrick Tucker, to the show. Fredrick, thanks so much for joining us here on the program. It's a real pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Jim. Happy to be here.
You know, I'm very excited to have you on the show because you and I were talking about the wonderful Alice Pearce. And again, she isn't always talked about, you know, in recent days as much as maybe in the earlier days when she was performing, but she left such an indelible mark on not only entertainment and television and stage and film, but in the lives of so many. She had such a fascinating life too. It wasn't always perfect. It wasn't always easy. And you document that so lovingly. What was it for you about this iconic and beloved figure that enticed you, inspired you to actually want to devote the time to writing this very special book? And congratulations on it.
Thank you. Well, it started when I was just a teenager. I happened to see Alice on an old rerun of her guest shot on Dennis the Menace TV series, and remembered her from Bewitched. Oh, well, this was after Bewitched was off the air, and certainly after Dennis the Menace was off the air, and Alice had been dead for, let's see, about 8 years when I saw that Dennis the Menace rerun. And I thought, this is the funniest lady. I'd like to know more about her. I knew she, you know, had died rather young. And I kind of got swept up in the tragedy of her early death. And I wanted to find out more about her. But as you know, in days before the internet, there was not many ways that someone in a small town could find out more without going to New York or California, someplace like that. I went to the largest library near me, about 30 minutes away, and found her obituary in the New York Times and got a few clues from that. And one was that she had left a widower, Paul Davis, and that he and she had operated an art gallery and framing studio together, very near the end of her life. So next I went to the Los Angeles phone directory there in that same library to look up the name of that business, which was still in operation then. This was in 1975. And Paul no longer was affiliated with the gallery, but it had kept the name Pacia's, what was the name of it? Well, anyway, it was just simply called Pacia's. That was his nickname, Paul Davis's nickname. So I wrote to him in care of the gallery. I was 15 years old, never heard from him. And then in 1984, 9 years later, I got a phone call from LA, and it was Paul's brother, calling
Mhm.
to say that Paul had died about 6 weeks prior. And this brother was going through Paul's files, and he found my letter.
Wow.
Paul had filed it with other letters from universities and archives who were seeking Alice's papers. So before he wanted to donate any of that, he asked if I would like to have anything from the collection. He said the majority is going to go to University of Southern California. He said, but is there anything you're interested in? So I made a brief list of things that I was interested in, and in about 2 months, he sent me 40 odd items, mainly photographs, pictures of Alice as a baby, as a bride, pictures of her parents and both her husbands, and her 1933 passport when she was 15 years old. Looked just like Gladys Kravitz, but younger. And, in the meantime, I thought, well, I need to contact some people who knew her besides this brother-in-law. And so I began to write to different people like Debbie Reynolds and Gene Kelly that worked with her in the movies. And Richard Deacon. I don't know if you know that name or not. He used
Oh,
to be the
sure.
old Dick Van Dyke
Dick
show.
Van Dyke Show, Mel.
Mel Cooley. He was one of Alice's best friends, especially near the end of her life. So everyone that I contacted, they were just crazy about Alice. They loved her. And so that I began to collect anecdotes about her and through these other folks. And I thought, one day I'd like to write about her. I didn't imagine a project, the scope of what mine turned out to be. But for 40 years, I was in my spare time digging up more and more and more, and went to California to research her collection at USC 3 or 4 times. Also did research at the New York Public Library, the University of Wyoming, at the American Heritage Center. UCLA has a great archive too. Went to UCLA mainly to view videos of her that are not accessible on the internet or on DVD or anything like that.
Some real exclusive footage that really hasn't been seen by many,
Yes.
which must have been a treat.
Well, for most of her television career, TV programs were still broadcast live from New York, and they were not filmed, they were not videoed, and they had a process called kinescopes. So as the program actually aired live, someone with a camera aimed it at the television screen and made a recording of it.
That's right.
And so a lot of those exist today. So that's how I found out more about her work, other than on, the shows in Hollywood, which appeared in like Hazel and the Shirley Temple Show and the rest that she appeared on after she moved to LA.
Absolutely.
She was primarily a Broadway actress up until 1962. And she later explained very near the end of her life why she gave up her stage career, because at one point she felt like that was really it, that performing live was really where it was at. But as time went on, supporting players like Alice didn't make very much money in Broadway shows. And so she had reached a point where she needed, to start saving some money for her retirement. So she decided to move to LA, and hadn't been there too long when she found out she was terminally ill.
I know. Yeah. Really an amazing story that she performed as Gladys Kravitz on Bewitched while she was ill. For folks tuning in, Fredrick Tucker is a retired educator, a historian, a lover of television, lover of entertainment, lover of the arts. He's always followed and admired Alice Pearce, and he lovingly writes about her. She was brought to Hollywood by Gene Kelly to reprise the Broadway performance in the film version of On the Town in 1949, and she played comedic supporting roles, as we know, in several films before being cast as the nosy neighbor, the original Gladys Kravitz in the television sitcom Bewitched back in '64. And she won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series posthumously after the second season of the series, and she had passed in 1966. So she wasn't with the series long, but the episodes that she was a part of were incredible. And when you do watch Bewitched and you see her, she was just ideal as Gladys Kravitz, just an ideal combination with her and George Tobias. I loved George Tobias. He was so fantastic as Abner Kravitz. Leave me alone. I'm trying to eat a sandwich. I didn't know that this is what marriage was going to be about. And, with her cockamamie scheming to try to find out what was going on in the Stevens household, she was perfectly cast. And then, of course, after her passing, then they brought on Sandra Gould. Sandra Gould was also wonderful as Gladys Kravitz. They had their own distinct, unique personalities and their own ways that they presented the character. Did you have a preference in terms of who you thought? I know it's very tough to even decide because there are people who enjoyed Alice's version of Gladys, Sandra's, because they saw Sandra longer on the series. But did you have a preference for you as who you think really nailed that Gladys Kravitz role and character?
Well, before I answer that, let me say that when I was doing my beginning research, the two first seasons, which were shot in black and white, were not syndicated.
Right.
And for many years, Bewitched ceased production in 1972. And for, maybe another 10 years, those black and white episodes were not shown. And so a great many people never knew the original Gladys. And all we knew was Sandra Gould's performance. But when, Nick at Night started showing the first two seasons, and then it went on VHS and eventually DVD, a lot of people saw Alice Pearce for the first time as Gladys. And I prefer her characterization, her portrayal of Gladys. And her Gladys is a more sympathetic Gladys than Sandra Gould's. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Sandra Gould. It appears that the character changed beginning with the third season when Sandra came on. And that may have been due to the way the part was actually written, and not that Sandra Gould changed it. It may have been that they saw that as a way to develop that character a little bit more. She became more, I don't want to use the word vindictive, but she was always trying to get Samantha caught by an authority, or because no one would believe Gladys. No one else saw the magic going on except Gladys.
And her facial expressions too, the way just the facial expressions were spectacular, and the tone of her voice. Abner, it was, when you do watch it, and I've loved Bewitched and have always watched it and admired it and loved learning more about it. She really was fantastic in that role.
Alice's Gladys was a more, as I said, sympathetic character. Because
yes, you felt sorry for her.
Yeah, a big part of her character was, she had to take medicine because, she had this condition.
Right.
And her husband thought that, she needed to take her medicine because she was hallucinating or what have
Right.
you. And she did. I mean, she was just a lovely person. And two, she and Samantha Stevens, played by Elizabeth Montgomery, they had a good rapport together. I mean, as neighbors, as the characters. You would see Gladys over there having a cup of coffee, and
Hmm.
and you could tell that Elizabeth Montgomery really liked Alice Pearce, and that was true of almost everybody who worked with her.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned when you really dug deep for a lot of Alice material to give a fuller appreciation and understanding of who this not only brilliant actress was on television, stage, film, and what have you, but who she was as a person, how she got started, what were her inspirations, influences, what was her ride like to get to where she got, even though she wasn't with us as long as we would have liked. You, like I said, you really went as far back as you could, all the way back. There she is. What a cutie, right? Huh?
Yes, this photograph was taken before she moved to Europe when she was not yet 2 years old. Her father was an international banker, and he was sent to be the president of a branch of the National City Bank of New York at their Brussels, Belgium office. So she grew up actually speaking French before she could speak English. Born in New York, but grew up in Europe and lived there until age 15. She later said that she never liked living in Europe, that she really wanted to be a typical American kid, teenager. Um, she lived in Brussels. She lived in Antwerp for a short time. She lived in Paris, and a very protective mother, sometimes overprotective. And Alice wanted nothing more than to be able to walk down the street to the drugstore and get a soda, or walk to the movie theater and see a movie by herself. And mother wouldn't let her do that. And she knew that that could happen in America, that her grandmother lived in a small town in Missouri. That was part of my research too, going to Perry, Missouri. And she envied those kids back in America. And so when she was 15, she had gone to, in Europe prior to that, she had gone to a finishing school, a French finishing school in Brussels. And the concentration was more on being trained how to be a lady. So there was not that much math or science or stuff like that. They were taught history, art, how to sew, how to serve tea, dance, that kind of thing. And it was, as I say, a finishing school. So she didn't excel in academics. She wasn't exposed really to true academics. When she got to the States, she had a very difficult time in the first boarding school she went to, which was the Master's School in Dobbs Ferry, New York.
Perfectly named.
Yeah. And at the Master's School, it was quite a change from the finishing school. They didn't allow the girls to wear evening dresses. They had to wear navy blue uniforms. They had to go to chapel, and it was a rigorous curriculum. And Alice did not do well because she did not have a background in math or science. She had studied literature, and she had learned Italian in that finishing school in Brussels, but she had a difficult time at the master's school. And so she chose Sarah Lawrence College in Bronxville, New York, as her college of choice, simply because they didn't grade anything. They did not have A's, B's, C's, D's that sort of thing. Simply, the professors would write a paragraph summing up the strengths and weaknesses of the student. And so that appealed to her. And she majored in drama. She had already won laughs at the finishing school in Brussels. She excelled in little plays that they put on. And when she heard that laughter, she knew that that was what she wanted to do, because as a child, she was very shy, very quiet, demure. And her mother was completely different from her. She knew how to entertain and was comfortable doing that. And Alice was sort of backward. She was somewhat of an oddball and didn't fit in really with the other girls in the schools. And her parents, had a plan for her. They wanted her to go to finishing school, marry the right fella, a doctor, a lawyer, someone like that, join the DAR, the Junior League, and be a wife and fit into proper society. She didn't want any part of that. She wanted to act, and they looked down on that. They thought, that was not a proper career for someone of her background.
When she was 9, there was an accident that happened, I believe, where she fell off a swing, losing her grip, and she landed on her chin right at that young, tender age.
Yes, and actually, one of her college friends told me that it actually broke her jaw.
Oh boy!
And when it was set, her jaw and chin, it never grew anymore. And so she had a very underdeveloped chin, and she, was very self-conscious about that, especially because her mother dragged her to all these dentists and specialists all over Europe trying to get it corrected. And of course, that just made Alice even more self-conscious about her looks. But in college, she decided that since she was interested in being a comedian, that that would give her a certain look, a look that other people didn't have. And so she made lemonade out of the lemons that life gave her, and did a very good job at it, and had a great attitude about it.
It was amazing too. She was once called the adenoidal lass with the most beautiful homely face on Broadway, where she carved this unique career playing wallflowers, nitwits, nags, and other oddball characters, all of whom really contrasted sharply with who she really was as a person, right?
Yes, she was very ladylike, and Elizabeth Montgomery noticed that about her. Everyone who worked with her, others that I interviewed, said that they could tell that she came from a very good family and a background that was different from, say, a theatrical background, which, she did not have a theatrical background. So, yeah, Richard Deacon said, when she went out in public, she always wore a hat and gloves, and even by the mid 60s, hats were going out of fashion. Jackie Kennedy saw to that, with the bouffant hairdo, and you could not wear some of those hats with a big bouffant hairdo. But Alice, she always loved hats. She had a collection of over 200 hats. And part of that was because her hair was very thin, and she could just plop on a hat and no one would really notice. She often wore wigs too, and but she loved hats. And always, yes, you see there, she's wearing one of her, and she liked hats that had a kooky touch like that, which that looks like a big pink cabbage on top of her head. That shot that's one of my favorite episodes that Alice did, was It's Magic. From the first season of Bewitched.
There she is with Dick York, the original Darren, right? Yeah.
Yes. And I have one of her hats, Jim.
Do you really?
Yes, her sister-in-law in 2013 contacted me, and she said, I have some of Alice's things that were passed on to me, and I don't know where to donate them. Would you be interested? And I said, oh, sure, because I have a hat collection. I've collected hats myself for over 40 years. And so the hat that Alice wore in her second wedding in 1964 is part of my collection. And I have three outfits that she wore on the Bewitched show.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
incredible. And it's the way your set is designed behind you, almost expecting the way it looks, three different models to come out and sort of show us those outfits.
So there's no one behind door number 1 or 2 or 3.
There's nobody there. It's just a figment of imagination. Here's another wonderful photo. Look at that, huh?
Yes, that was from a little play she was in Brussels at the Les Tourelles, the finishing school. Have you ever heard of Anna Russell, who was sort of an operatic comedian?
Yes.
She was also a student at that school, although she was older than Alice, but they were there for a short time together.
Wow. This one goes back to 1947, huh?
That's in her hit nightclub act at the Blue Angel, which was a very chic nightclub in New York. And when she was playing there in 1947 and 48, you couldn't get in the place. I mean, it was a small nightclub anyway, but they said everyone came there. You know, Noel Coward, Queen Elizabeth later went there. But
did Gene Kelly find her there?
no, he saw her in the original production, a Broadway production of On the Town,
Mm-hmm.
in which her character was Lucy Schmeeler, you know, the ugly duckling. She was his blind date, his character's blind date, Gaby. And the part in the Broadway production is very tiny.
Yeah.
And he saw something in it that, you know, he wanted her for that part. And the part was enlarged just for her. And he brought her to Hollywood. She was the only one from the Broadway cast to repeat her role. Of course, the movie was a lot different from the stage production. They didn't use much of Leonard Bernstein's music. And
When he brought her to Hollywood, which was a beautiful opportunity given to her, do you know if, or would you assume that they stayed in touch and remained friends all the way up to her last years, not only with Bewitched, but of her life? Do you think that they stayed in contact?
I don't think that they did. They did for a short time, some communication between the two of them that exists in Alice's collection indicates that they did, you know, stay in touch through the early 50s. But he loved Alice Pearce, and he said she was the complete antithesis of what you saw on the screen, that she was intelligent, she was lovely, charming, and he really did think the world of Alice Pearce. And she did make more MGM musicals, The Belle of New York with Fred Astaire and
That's
Vera
right.
Ellen, and the remake of The Women, rather, The Opposite Sex, which it wasn't per se a musical, but did have some songs in it. But she did film several films for MGM, which that produced On the Town.
Married in 1948?
Yes, she married John Rocks, who was a songwriter, although he had no real training as a songwriter. But he heard these tunes and these lyrics in his head, and he had a friend who would help him compose the music. But he was 15 years older than Alice and had wanted to be an actor himself, but it never really panned out. And they met in 1941. They knew her. They both knew Leonard Sillman, who was the producer of New Faces which was a Broadway show. Well, there were several New Faces. She was in New Faces of 1943. And so she and John dated off and on for 7 years, and then they married in 48. And she was actually the breadwinner during their marriage. His hits were sporadic. His biggest hit was "It's a Big, Wide, Wonderful World." And then if you know the Christmas song, "I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas," that was another one of his songs. He wrote many songs. He died suddenly of a heart attack in 1957. And she said if she hadn't been working, she would have lost her mind because she was very devoted to him. They had no children. And so she was widowed for 7 years until she remarried. After her cancer diagnosis, she grabbed all the gusto she could with what time she had left. She married a second time to Paul Davis, who was another person in the entertainment world. He too had started out as an actor, but then became a behind the scenes person, a stage manager for a lot of productions in New York. And so he told her that he would stick with her until the end. They were best friends. And he told her that he would stick with her until the end. And they decided to get married. And in those final 18 months, or 21 months, I think, 21 months after her diagnosis, she married Paul. She accepted the part on Bewitched, although I must point out that it was not a contract. She did not have a long-term contract when she filmed the first 2 episodes. She thought that they were just going to be two episodes and that was it. But the reaction to her character and to George Tobias's character was so positive that the producers decided to give them contracts, and so they would appear in 7 out of 13 episodes.
Was there ever talk of a spin-off for the two of them? You know, in those early years in the 60s and the 70s, it was spin-off city for a lot of shows, especially Norman Lear with all of his shows. But was there ever a talk of taking the Kravitzes and spinning it off, whether it was with Alice or Sandra? Was there ever that talk of spin-off?
I never heard of one, no.
Could you imagine how terrific that would have been?
Possibly.
The Kravitzes.
A lot of spin-offs, failed. I mean, look at Polly Holliday, who played Flo on Alice.
Yes.
So while she was great as the second banana, Alice, her show Flo was not that great.
And Gloria from All in the Family, Sally Struthers, had a short-lived show as well called Gloria. And that didn't. One of the prolific actresses of the day that you always saw, she had a wonderful friendship with Lucille Ball, was Mary Wicks. There's Mary Wicks with Alice Pearce in one of the episodes. She just had she played certain characters as well. And she was terrific. And the two of them, great together.
Yes, they did 2 episodes of Dennis the Menace together, and it was the one pictured here that I saw in 1974 that got me interested in researching Alice. And Mary Wicks, like Alice, was an only child. Mary Wicks had always wanted to be, an actress. She played parts similar to Alice's parts. At one point, Alice's mother was worried about her becoming an actress. She said, "I'm going to give you a typing and shorthand course to fall back on in case you can't find work as an actress." Mary Wicks had done the same thing. She had taken a secretarial course also. And they both got their start on Broadway and then moved into television and film later. Mary Wicks was 7 years older than Alice, and when I contacted her, she wrote back saying that she didn't know Alice very well. Now, mind you, they had worked twice on Dennis the Menace. They had worked on the Shirley Temple show, and they had shared scenes together in the 1964 film Dear Heart with Geraldine Page. But yet she said, we didn't know each other that well. She said she was older than I was,
Yeah.
which is just totally untrue. Mary Wick's born in 1910 and Alice in 1917. So,
Wow.
but anyway, I think Mary never wanted anybody to know how old she was. She
It was,
wanted to keep getting parts, get roles, because
back then, that was very big,
yeah,
right?
if they think you're too old, you won't get called.
You
So
won't get called.
yeah.
There was a period where Alice had her own show, right? The Alice Pearce show.
Yes, and that was way back, 1949, and it was live. It was only a 15-minute program, and it was on Friday nights. And it was her a nightclub act. It was just she performed the same songs, and her accompanist was Mark Lawrence, who accompanied her at the Blue Angel nightclub. And this was right after her success at the Blue Angel, and but her show was not very successful. Her songs were kind of nutty, and one of her friends said most people just wondered what the hell she was doing, and it only lasted 6 weeks, and I never really could find out much about the show. No kinescopes exist of it. But I don't know whether they pulled the plug or if it ended simply because Alice, it was time for her to film the movie version of On the Town.
Mm-hmm.
So the week after the Alice Pearce show, that was the name of it, after it folded, she, was on a plane to Hollywood to film her first movie. And a lot of sources on the internet say that it was her movie role that got her the television show. Not true. That is not true. It was her nightclub act that got her that TV show.
That's amazing. See, there's that fact right for you, folks.
She did radio. She did nightclub. She did on and off Broadway, film, TV. She did everything but vaudeville or the
vaudeville. Matter of fact, during the 53-54 television season, she was seen regularly on ABC's Jamie, which starred Brandon DeWild, right?
Only for a couple of episodes. Those sources say that, she was a regular. She was more of a semi-regular.
Semi-regular.
And she played a wallflower, another wallflower like Lucy Miller.
Now, wasn't she in 1964 originally approached to play the part of Grandmama on The Addams Family?
She wasn't approached, but she did try out for that part.
She tried out for it. Wow.
And they said, oh, no, you're much too young, She did not have to audition for Bewitched. They called her. She didn't call them. And there were Harry Ackerman, who was the executive producer. He knew her from other Screen Gems productions like Hazel and the Donna Reed Show. And he picked her. He had a discussion with William Asher and Danny Arnold, and she was really the only contender. They had a list of others, including Mary Wick. She was on that list, and but Alice was the only one seriously considered. And Bill Asher called her up and told her they had a part for her for a couple of episodes, and of course she took it because even though she was had just recently had surgery, which that's how they discovered she had ovarian cancer. She went ahead and took it. She kept working. She made 3 or 4 films after her diagnosis. The one with Jerry Lewis, The Disorderly Orderly, was made right after her surgery. And she played a hypochondriac in that. I think it's one of her best parts on film.
She was fantastic in that, which is amazing too, because generally, she had the privileged upbringing. Her parents didn't really want her to necessarily pursue acting. She was, 13 Broadway productions and Acclaim, Smash Act, the Nightclub, all these things. But she was actually, and these parts that she played, she was really out there, and she was bold and enthusiastic, but she was really a shy person, right?
Yes, she was somewhat of a loner. One of her fellow actors told me, and she, I mean, she had lots of friends. Don't get me wrong. Like Debbie Reynolds was a very good friend of hers. They socialized occasionally, but even in New York, she was somewhat of a loner, and her choice is always kind of a shy, retiring type. Um, but beloved. One source that I found early on when I was just a kid, it was a book called MGM Musicals, and in the back it had like a little encyclopedia section which focused on performers in MGM musicals, and Alice, believe it or not, was featured. She hardly ever made any kind of book back, early days, like in the 60s and 70s. You would hardly ever see her featured in a book, but she was in this one. And the writer said, everyone loved Alice. Now, that was not just something he threw in there. Evidently, he had some knowledge. He had contacts with people who knew her. And the only person that I knew of, and that Richard Deacon said who did not like Alice, was Noel Coward. She had appeared in his Broadway musical Sail Away, 1961. And they hit it off at first, but then something happened where she got on his bad list. And so things did not go well.
Didn't go too well.
She did not like that man, and he was very cool toward her.
I would imagine. Agnes Moorehead. She worked well with Agnes Moorehead.
Believe it or not, she only worked with Alice in Agnes rather in one episode.
I know.
Their characters never,
crossed.
Never crossed until the very final episode that Alice filmed. She had always wanted to share a scene with Agnes. And in the final episode that she was able to do, that was the one. And because she respected Agnes Moorehead greatly.
Absolutely. You mentioned the Jerry Lewis film, Disorderly Orderly. That was spectacular. I'm wondering if this scene is at that Warner Columbia Ranch. Remember they had the park with the fountain and the swimming pool, and they used that for movies and all these TV shows, Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie and Gidget and Hazel. I wonder if this scene was shot in that central area.
No, it was not. It was filmed at the Greystone Mansion.
That was at the mansion.
Yes. Have you been there?
No, I haven't had the pleasure yet.
Greystone Mansion. I've been there twice.
Have you?
Yes. And lots of movies were filmed there.
Yes.
Betty Davis's Dead Ringer.
Yes.
Another one about the time the Disorderly Orderly was filmed is The Loved One with Robert Morse and Jonathan Winters. Tons of stuff have been filmed at the Greystone Mansion. And for the Disorderly Orderly, it was supposed to be a sanitarium.
Yes.
A hospital for rich, sick people. And of course, Alice played this hypochondriac. And so while Jerry is wheeling her around the grounds, she's going on and on to the other patients there about her leaky gallbladder and her weak kidneys and her leg that she broke and I don't know how many places and had to have 88 stitches or something.
Yeah.
Like that. So as she describes all these aches and pains, Jerry, his problem is he has sympathy pains. He's in the wrong line of work. He wants to be a doctor, but he has sympathy pains. So anytime anybody describes their condition, it applies to him. He takes on those same symptoms.
Takes on the symptoms that he
Yeah,
hears. Also worked with Tallulah Bankhead. This goes back to
several times.
1954. This
Yes.
is
Oh, yeah. Now
Dear Charles.
yes, I wouldn't say that they were exactly friends, but they were friendly and certainly got on together. Alice first supported Tallulah in a in a touring production of Private Lives. That was back in the 40s.
Mm,
That was right after she did Own the Town. So she worked with Tallulah on Broadway 2 times. In Midgie Purvis in 1961, and then you saw her with Tallulah and Dear Charles there. That was in 54. I
nice.
think probably Tallulah had something to do with Alice being chosen, especially for Midgie Purvis.
Mm,
Um,
that's a great story. She also worked with Elaine Stritch too, and Sail Away in 1961, huh?
yeah, and that was a bittersweet show for Alice because it was the end. Her last Broadway appearance was Sail Away, and as I said, things did not go well with Noel Coward. She and Stritch got along just fine. I have a letter from Elaine Stritch, and it was written in the 80s, I guess, and she said, "God, I still miss that woman." So
Yeah,
everybody loved
everybody.
it. Yeah.
You mentioned Debbie Reynolds too.
Yeah, they had worked together first in the Dallas State Fair production of
This is My Six Loves.
That's My Six Loves. That's 10 years after they first worked together. And they worked together in Summer Theater in Dallas, Texas in 1953. And stayed in touch and then were reunited. This is the first thing that Alice did when she moved to LA from New York in 62 was My Six Loves. And it's a great scene with her as a bus driver, kids, and very funny scene. And she and Debbie stayed in touch right up to the end.
Worked with Sandra Dee too. It's a 62.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tammy and the Doctor, a Universal production. And that was one, Richard Deacon summed it up. He said he'd like to catch a movie like that on The Late Show with Alice, because in one like this, she was not only funny, but she was warm.
Absolutely was. Yes. And you could tell through her performances that there was a depth, there was a warmth, there was a loving person underneath all the craziness. And again, just the time with George Tobias, he was such a brilliant actor. I just love him and his reactions to both Alice and then when he continued with Sandra Gould, he was so perfectly cast as Abner. And
Yeah.
even the names, Gladys, Abner,
Yes,
Kravitz,
exactly.
just so perfect, right?
They do.
Abner. It wouldn't have worked maybe if it was Bob or Mike but Abner.
Yes, exactly.
And they had a wonderful working relationship as well, from what you've gathered.
As far as I know, I wish I had been able to contact him. There's nothing that I've found in print where he talks about Alice, either during her lifetime or after. Of course, he lived until 1980, and she died in 66. But I do know that he did suggest to Sandra Gould that she put her name in the hat for replacing Alice. She didn't want to, but eventually he convinced her, you should go ahead. She was newly widowed, Sandra Gould, and he thought that going back to work would be good for her. So they had known each other for many years, Tobias and Gould, and back in New York. But no, I would imagine that he and Alice got on well, but there's no written record that I've found in which he discusses that. And I wish Alice had done more interviews in the press and discussed some of her movies that she was never given the opportunity, I guess. And she did appear on some talk shows. She was on the Jack Paar show, which, he was the forerunner to Johnny Carson, Tonight Show. She did appear on that numerous times. All those tapes are lost. They recorded over them or destroyed them or what have. None of those exist that I know of.
Yeah.
She did. You remember Virginia Graham? She had a talk show.
Oh, sure. Yes.
She did.
Legend.
She did late in her life. She did 2 shows with Gypsy Rose Lee. She had a talk show that was taped in San Francisco, and Alice went down for 2 of those. And this was, in the last 6 months of her life. And I don't know that those shows exist. So there's no really filmed interview that I know of.
It's amazing, like you say, the amount of things that she was in besides the beloved Bewitched sitcom series on ABC, like we've talked about On the Town, the Alice Pearce Show, Lux Video Theater, The Belle of New York, the Motorola Television Hour, Broadway Television Theater, Jamie, Take It From Me, How to Be Very, Very Popular, Alice in Wonderland, The Opposite Sex, The Real McCoys, The Twilight Zone, The Ann Southern Show, as well as Lad, a Dog, Dennis the Menace, My Six Loves, Tammy and the Doctor, The Thrill of It All, The Donna Reed Show. She was on A Touch of Glamour, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. She was on season 2, episode 10 as Goodbye George, Hazel, Dear Heart, Disorderly Orderly, and it was in 64, Kiss Me Stupid, Bewitched, of course, from 64 to 66, some like 27 episodes, Dear Bridget, Bus Riley's Back in Town, The Glass Bottom Boat, and Vacation Playhouse as the music teacher. So there was a lot to her that was beyond just that fabulous taking on of that iconic role. And you really did so much research too. She achieved, of course, her greatest fame, best known as Gladys Kravitz, the nosy, snoopy neighbor on Bewitched. But you were able to do exhaustive research. This took years to do. And I believe, does this go back some 20 or 30 years when you first started to put this together or think about it?
Well, it's been almost 50 years. It has
Wow.
it has been 50 years.
50 years.
1975. The book was published in 2021, and a lot of the research I had begun in the 70s. Understand it had to be done off and on because life gets in the way. You can't be researching Alice Pearce every day. But yes, oh my goodness, I have 5 or 6 big plastic file tubs full of memorabilia and documents, all the research. Yes, and I reached out to a lot of people. Some I never heard from.
Did that surprise you? They just want to be incognito?
No, I guess I was surprised by Nancy Walker. She was one of Alice's very best friends. They appeared several times together on Broadway, including the original production of On the Town. They were very, very close. But she responded, but she apologized, saying that she just didn't share private memories of her friends. And, you have to respect that.
She was Rhoda's mom on Rhoda, and she was always in those Bounty paper towel commercials too.
Yes. So, but still, those who did help me provided a lot of information that I couldn't find elsewhere.
Right.
And
some beautiful stories.
The book is completely documented with footnotes. And also among the notes are extra facts that I didn't want to slow down the actual narrative. So I put all the extra facts in the notes section. And I still pick up that book and thumb through it. And before I know it, I've read 30 or 40 pages and I'm like, this is pretty good.
Would you say it's one of, if not the definitive book on her. You took
The only book on her. So
there's
it has to
no
be
other
a
nobody
different one.
took the time
Well,
um,
nobody
in
will,
the way that you did. Yeah.
nobody will need to. It's like this was my second biography. The first was Verna Felton, who was
That's one of the great answers I've ever
yes.
heard. Nobody don't even think about it. I took care of it. Nobody will even need
well,
to.
well, when
It took
Verna
me 50 years to write this, folks. I covered it all.
and still a lot of people don't know about it, which I go online and I
Get
look
this
at
book, folks. It's
these
fantastic.
Bewitched fan websites, and they're talking about Alice, and they're sharing all these incorrect facts that are on the internet. And I'm like, no, check out my book, because there was even one for a while that said her real name was Alicia Pearce.
Oh,
Not true, not true.
Alicia.
She was
Yeah.
named for her great aunt Alice Chowning Pearce, and that was Alice's middle name, Chowning, Chowning. And Alice, I don't think she liked that middle name. She didn't have it included in her college yearbook for certain, and she didn't put it on her passport. She just put the initial C. But no, I found out tons of stuff about her that is not on the internet, and you'll only find it in my book.
You'll only find it in Mr. Tucker's book. Absolutely. You're a retired educator too, right? You inspired and mentored young minds over the years. Tell us about some of that extraordinary work and how having that background may have aided in doing the research, getting the facts right, and pouring your heart into such a fabulous book, Fredrick.
Well, I guess I've always been a stickler for details in anything that I'm interested in or anything I'm doing. One of my hobbies is genealogy. And of course, that involves a lot of painstaking research, documenting family relationships and events and what have you. I was a history teacher, mainly. I taught fourth grade and I taught sixth grade. I taught sixth grade about 20 years. And for the majority of that time, I taught ancient world history to sixth graders in our state here. That's the curriculum for sixth grade. So I guess, teaching facts in a history course that lends itself to researching someone's life because you want to print the facts as well as the opinions. I mean, the facts are necessary. I checked and double checked sources. Some I could tell, some journalists, had kind of fudged a little bit here and there. One thing somebody has printed over and over was that she grew up in Rome. She did not live in Rome. She spoke Italian, but that was because she studied it in Brussels. But I've found no documentation that her father ever worked in Rome or that the family lived there. So
Yeah,
maybe I've cleared up a few things.
I think you have for people in a way that is very, accommodating to the accuracy of this beloved individual who was a wonderful character actor as well, too. I love character actors, and sometimes they don't always get the spotlight like the leads do. Have you always enjoyed character actors and actresses? And
yes,
are there other books you're working on other people?
I've always loved the little people or the supporting players. Ever since I was a kid, I would notice people like Rita Shaw or Madge Blake or Percy Helton or some of those because I grew up on 1950s and 60s reruns. And I was always drawn to the character people. I guess the only major star I was ever a fan of, didn't do research on her, but that was Lucille Ball. And always enjoyed her shows but I was always watching out for Vivian Vance or Gail Gordon or any of the character people who
You
appeared
know
on.
who needs a book? The actress that played Mrs. Trumbull upstairs.
Oh gosh, Elizabeth Patterson. I adore that woman. She's my fellow Southerner, you know. She's from Savannah, Tennessee.
That's
I,
right.
I've been to that town. I've been to her grave, in fact.
Have you really?
Yes, I have a large collection of photographs of Elizabeth Patterson going way back to when.
Somehow I knew. That's why I
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
yep.
yeah.
Somehow I knew.
My earliest picture of her is when she was 16, and she looked just like Mrs. Trumbull then.
Yeah.
So
And the mom, the one that played Lucille Ball's mother, Mrs. McGillicuddy.
Catherine Card. Yes,
Yes.
Catherine Card was, I don't have many pictures of Catherine Card, but I loved her voice. She was terrific. And like Verna
Yes.
Felton, whose biography I wrote,
Yes.
Catherine Card got her start on stage, as did many of these.
Gail Gordon, of
Excellent.
course, who was always side by side. If it wasn't Vivian, it was Gail Gordon who was always side by side with Lucy. Yeah.
I've done a good bit of research on folks like Madge Blake. She was Aunt
Yes.
Harriet on Batman.
Yes.
In the
Did
real
you
book.
know? Did you know that originally Lucille Ball had wanted? Do you know who? You probably know this, but for anybody watching, or in case you didn't know, a little I Love Lucy trivia, just to deviate a little bit, and then we'll come back to Alice. The original people that I believe Lucy wanted to play, or they were being considered to play Fred and Ethel Mertz, was Bea Benaderet as Ethel and Gail Gordon as Fred Mertz, but they weren't available at the time. They were doing other things. And then Vivian Vance and William Frawley, which I think were fabulous choices. I mean, the curmudgeon of Bill Frawley, and Vivian was fabulous as Ethel. But Bea Benaderet, who, of course, people remember from George Burns and Gracie Allen and so much more, and Gail Gordon were the original considerations for Fred and Ethel Mertz.
Of course I knew that. I have a huge collection of Bea Benaderet.
Of course he does.
And
now we know what's behind those curtains, folks. Everything, the treasures are behind those curtains.
No, I've been
When I come to the Carolinas, I'm buying and bringing cheesecake, and we go through those tubs.
Well, Bea Benaderet, I started researching her at the same time I researched Alice. But I have to say that Bea's family did not really want a biography, and I don't know why. They never told me. Her son, I talked with him several times. He was very gracious, Jack Bannon. And I sent him a copy of my Verna Felton biography, and he thanked me for it, but he was not interested. A very pleasant man, but he was simply not interested. But Bea certainly has a story. Everybody's dead now that I could have interviewed, really, that knew much about Bea, especially her early life and career. But I do have an enormous amount of material on Bea Benaderet. Maybe one day. I do have a good bit on Madge Blake, including some of her personal papers and family photos. And Madge Blake was a amateur poet. You may not have known that. So I have copies of many of her poems. Rita Shaw. Do you know that name?
Sure, yes.
I've been to her hometown of South Paris, Maine, and researched her for a long time. So one day I will write about her as well. Ruth McDevitt, Marjorie Bennett, Cheerio Meredith, the list goes on.
You know who passed way too early? From I Dream of Jeannie, Emmeline Henry, who played Amanda Bellows.
Yeah.
There's an episode where she's not Amanda Bellows, she's playing another character. And I don't know, maybe I think it was a shyster with this other guy. There was something that she was just perfect in that. And I think they realized that they should bring her back as Dr. Bellows' wife, because their personalities were that was perfectly cast. Hayden Rourke, Emmeline Henry, just everybody in I Dream of Jeannie. And there was always the Bewitched I Dream of Jeannie sort of thing going on. Do you like Barbara Eden? Do you like Elizabeth Montgomery? I loved all of them in both series. But she passed too early. She was so perfect as Amanda Bellows on I Dream of Jeannie.
Yes, I mean, I watched it some. I wasn't a big Jeannie fan. Nothing against any of the folks on the show. Um, that just wasn't one of my favorites.
Haven't been to Cocoa Beach, huh?
No.
um, what was the other thing? Oh, I was going to say that, of course, that ranch, they call it the ranch, but that area, which has now all been torn down, the house used for Bewitched was also the same house that was used for Dr. Bellows and Amanda Bellows in Bewitched and a lot of other things.
Yeah,
I wish there was a way they could have saved those
me too.
facades for Bewitched, Hazel, which was Gidget, I Dream of Jeannie, Father Knows Best, all those shows that were filmed. I think some Twilight Zones were there. Just all the shows that we grew up with or that we enjoy or that we revel in now and celebrate. Everything's been torn down. And I wish there was a way they could have put them in a museum
Yeah.
or made a little park or something somewhere else. I think people would pay admission actually to have an opportunity to stand in front of what was the Bewitched house or this house or that house
Oh,
from
well,
their
the Bewitched fanfare group, used to go there almost every time they got together.
Exactly. Yeah. I just wish, it was a part of broadcast and television and Hollywood history. Speaking of which, of course, was the posthumous Emmy. Tell us about this really special photo here.
That's one from my collection that's Paul Davis, Alice's second husband, who accepted her Emmy win that night. And his brother sent me that photograph of Paul. And I also have a clip from the awards telecast. And Paul was seated at the table with Elizabeth Montgomery. Debbie Reynolds was also at that table in the event that Agnes Moorehead won, because she and Alice were nominated for the same category. And also at that table was Don Knotts.
Oh my God.
He won Best Supporting Actor.
What a table that was.
Comedy series, yes. So, yes, it was that moment of Paul's acceptance speech and Alice's win was in every item covering the Emmy Awards the next day. They mentioned her award. It was prominently mentioned. And, some people say, well, it was a sympathy vote because, she had just passed away. But she did an incredible job. We don't know what agony that poor lady was going through those last few weeks and months. And we can only follow her example when something horrific happens to us, as to have the same courage and grace as she did.
Isn't it quite amazing that through that run of Bewitched, she was ill? Did the cast know? Did Elizabeth know? Did anybody quietly know, or did she keep it quiet and just, soldier through because she really wanted to be a part of it, and it was a joyful experience to be on the series and other things that she did? Was it something that they knew or didn't know until she fell iller where she couldn't necessarily keep it quiet? How did that work?
Well, she was basically a very private person to begin with before her illness, a very private person. And she didn't tell them about her diagnosis. As I told you, she was only hired for 2 episodes. But when she got the contract in October of '64, she didn't mention it to them. And she looked great through season 1 and the very beginning of season 2, still looking good. But very soon the weight started dropping off, and they put 2 and 2 together. She never talked about it with many people, but I have seen an interview with Elizabeth Montgomery where they did discuss it. Alice was worried about how she looked, about how thin she was getting, and so there had to be some discussion between her and some of the folks there. But it was, I'm sure a lot of people never ever mentioned it to her because they knew that's the way she wanted it to be. And she literally worked until she could not stand up.
Why is it important for us to remember people like Alice Pearce? And what did you get out of writing the book? Meaning, I would imagine here's a figure that you saw on television and maybe other capacities, admired, appreciated, learned about who the person was on camera, which enhanced probably your appreciation of her artistry and the roles that she took on, but also learned about who Alice Pearce was as the person. Why is it important to remember people like Alice Pearce? And I would imagine this brought you closer to this figure that you were intrigued by learning about her life, writing about it, and sharing it with all of us in the book.
Well, as I said earlier, I think I got swept up in the tragedy of her early death. And at that point, I was 14, 15 years old. I had not experienced death very often. And I kept thinking back then, why did she have to die so young? Why did this have to happen to her? She should still be here. She should still be playing on current television shows, And of course, I had to accept it. I mean, now this was someone I'd never known, but I was very moved by her story. And the more and more I interviewed people, the more and more I became to love the woman, the lady, Alice Pearce. And I think as far as what we could learn from this is just what I said earlier. I mean, she's an example to us. Gloria Vanderbilt, when she was diagnosed with cancer, excuse me, her son Anderson Cooper said she didn't ask, why did I get cancer? She asked, why should I not get cancer? We aren't guaranteed anything in this life. And Alice Pearce knew she wasn't going to live long. She didn't sit down. She didn't retire. She didn't, bury her head. She got out and did everything she wanted to do. I mean, made more movies, was on Bewitched, got married again, bought her first home, moved, opened an art gallery. The woman didn't stop. So, we have to applaud that. And she didn't do it for the attention. She did it, because she wanted to live her life just as we all do. We want to get as much out of life as we can. We're not guaranteed tomorrow.
Beautifully said, my friend. Beautifully said. It is the definitive book, folks, on beloved Alice Pearce, and you got to get it. Whether you're a Bewitched fan, a television classic TV fan, or you love character actors, or you just want to learn about this very, very special person and all the things that she did, but what her life was like and what the story was. This man has spent 50 years making sure that the story was told accurately. And as I said in the beginning, lovingly as well. And he knocked it out of the park, illustrated with over 225 rare photos chronicling the public and private lives of a lady much beloved by her fellow actors, as we talked about, fans around the world. The book also contains almost 70 pages of endnotes, which provides source documentation as well as extra commentary on topics and individuals addressed in the main narrative. It really is a spectacular. I love the cover. I love Sweet Oddball, the story of Alice Pearce. I love the title. How did you come up with the title?
Alice provided the title. She was quoted in 1958 as enjoying playing sweet oddballs. And the more I knew about her, it was not just, Gladys Kravitz was an oddball. Lucy Schmeler was an oddball. I mean, she played a lot of oddballs. But the thing about Alice is you would not believe how many people I interviewed used the word sweet to describe Alice Pearce. And it
Yeah.
was not that I prompted that at all. It just came out.
It
That was
just came out.
that was the top one adjective
That stood out.
that folks who actually knew her, they used that word sweet. So I said, okay, this is perfect because in her private life, especially when she was younger, she was indeed an oddball. She did not fit in Europe. When she came to the States at age 15, she didn't fit in with those girls. She had trouble with academics. She was self-conscious about her appearance. Therefore, she retreated into a fantasy world. And that's how she nurtured her love for acting. And once she got a taste of that and being able to make people laugh, she knew that that was the spot for her in this world. And she lived up to sweet and oddball. But I just thought it was, since she used the term herself,
It's perfect.
it would be perfect as a title.
Now, when people research further and watch things that she's been in, whether it's Bewitched or anything else, movies or anything else that pops up, they're going to have, I think, a deeper love and appreciation for Alice Pearce. And this conversation here on the Jim Masters Show series hopefully has put that stamp on it. And your book has absolutely put that stamp on it as well, my friend. And really a beautiful conversation and tribute. As I mentioned as well, in addition to everything else I talked about with the book, there's an extensive appendix listing Alice Pearce's professional credits and a comprehensive index as well. So book is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the places where books could be found, right, Fredrick?
Right. And from the publisher itself, Bear Manor Media.
Absolutely, yes, and they're fabulous. How did it feel after 50 years to put the final period on the last word on the last sentence? That must have been something for you, huh?
Yes. It was a lot of work. I had to, the project, when I first sat down to finally start writing the thing, because everybody kept asking, when are you going to start? When are you going to start? So it was after I retired from teaching that I started. And I went about the process using the old method that I don't know if you used this or had to write term papers or research papers in high school.
Oh, sure.
They taught us
typewriter with whiteout.
They taught us to use index cards.
Yes.
To to organize your thoughts. And I did just that. I got some colored index cards. So yellow cards were for her private life, her parents, her husbands, that kind of thing. Her stage career was a different color. Her movie career was a different color. Television, a different color. Because I had this enormous stack of documents that I had to, and in one article, she may talk about her family, her television show, or Broadway or whatever. And, I had to pull out all those facts, but then get them all sorted so that when it was time to write about a particular thing, the work would be done. And if I hadn't done that, I couldn't have put it together. But like I say, I'm a stickler for details. So
yeah. Did you go through a lot of microfilm, microfiche, all of that?
Oh, my goodness. I had to order lots from other places and have it sent on interlibrary loan to my local library, particularly the papers from Missouri and Ohio, where her parents grew up, because they covered Alice Pearce, especially the little small town newspaper, her mother's hometown in Missouri. Alice Pearce made a front page all the time, and you knew almost her every move. And so that the Missouri Historical Society would only let me get 1 or 2 reels of microfilm at a time, and it took forever for it to come. So, a lot of the research was done around 2003, 2004. I made numerous trips to California doing research. Oh God, I'll never get my money back. That wasn't the point. I didn't write the book to make a nickel.
Worthwhile investment, right?
I'll never get my money back. It was something that I wanted to do, and I wanted to do it for her.
Absolutely.
And I will say I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of it. And I want to give credit to my editor and best friend, Tony Waters. He lives about 3 hours from me. And he came every 2 months and spent the weekend, and I would have a fresh chapter or two, or sometimes 3 or 4, waiting on him. And he went through it and helped make it even better.
As you can hear, folks, don't you just love his Boston accent?
What accent? I don't have an accent. You have an accent.
We have the.
You have an accent. I don't even know where you are. Where are you anyway?
We are in the New York area. Right here.
Wow, bless your heart.
Where are we? We're on the Jim Masters show.
Yeah.
That's where we are, Fredrick. Really a delight chatting with you. I know we wanted to put this together. When I first heard about the book, I said, I've got to get, if he's willing, not everybody that writes books or does documentaries or films wants to go on camera and be willing to talk about these things. They'd rather be incognito and just have the book out there. But you're so well spoken about it. You're so passionate and enthusiastic about it. I was excited when we were able to connect and you were saying, I'd love to come on the show. So I'm glad that you did. And it's really a delight. And I hope you come back. And I just wanted to, since I work in television and radio professionally, and I have for years, PBS and everywhere else, I'm a big fan and aficionado of everything television as well. So there's a couple of friends here that just wanted to say they love the book as well. Gilligan from Gilligan's Island is here. This is Bob Denver, and this is with love from Dream of Denver, his wife, who's a fan of our show, and she's been a guest several times. And she looked at our set and she said, Jim, you're missing something. I said, what am I missing? She said, you are missing a Gilligan bobblehead. So she sent this along, and it's part of our set. And speaking of shows, here's the I Dream of Jeannie bottle.
Neat.
And Jeannie's in there blinking, and she loved Bewitched as well. There are some things within the two series that sort of cross over. Some of the music, when they change scenes. And I believe in the beginning, there was something really exciting. And that was if you look at it, there was the Alfred Bellows and Amanda Bellows' house at one time in one episode was the interior of the Bewitched house with furniture rearranged was used as the interior of their house. If you look closely in an episode of I Dream of Jeannie, you'll recognize it's the Stevens household that they used. How cool is that, huh?
Well, in the Kravitz house, it changed appearances all the time, but there were several times they used the Dennis the Menace interior.
That's right.
House for the Kravitz house.
That's right.
And so Alice was all over the ranch lot. I mean, she did Donna Reed, she did Hazel, she did Dennis the Menace.
She did.
And then finally Bewitched. So
Bewitched. And we're so glad that she did. We're so glad she did go out to LA to do that series. Here is the book one more time, everybody. Sweet Oddball, The Story of Alice Pearce by Fredrick Tucker. Fredrick, thank you for stopping by the Jim Masters show.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
I was going to say, stop by, spread the word. We'll keep the porch light on for you, as we always like to for all of our guests. And come see us again. And I hope you enjoyed the time with me as much as I absolutely
did. I had a ball. Thank you.
You're terrific to chat with, my friend, and we shall see you again, okay? You be well. Thank you, Fredrick.
Bye.
Take care. Amazing conversation, and thank you for joining us, everybody. Leave a comment below if you enjoyed it. Give this episode, of course, a like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share this episode on your social media. Drop a comment below, and you can find this episode and watch it again and hundreds more with celebrity friends and special guests on the YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. I'm Jim Masters, thanking you for your time, this time till next time here on The Jim Masters Show. Come see us again. We love having you here. Be well and cheers.